this at convention, modified a little bit here. So we're kind of going to go maybe a little heavier on the science today than we have on some of these prior videos. And really kind of Gold Factor is one of those products. I know it kind of comes off on a little bit on the expensive side. You got a special now, so that makes it better. But when you kind of understand what this is and what it does for you, you can understand the value that it has. Now, this is kind of a nice complement to what we've been offering for a while at For Life. And in the same sense, it's a little bit of a shift for us. This product is going down very much into the cellular level, into the very mechanics of every cell in your body. So while transfer factors cover the immune system, which covers the entire body in one way or another, this is a nice complement in that this is also supporting all the cells of your body in whatever it is they do. So very good complementary products for it. And hopefully in going through the science on this, you'll kind of get a little bit of understanding of just how cool Gold Factor is. So let's kind of set the stage a little bit here. I'm going to talk first about a compound called NAD+. So inside every cell in your body, it has this pathway, a mechanism by which it generates its energy. This energy cycle requires a number of things to function, and NAD+ is probably the most important one in that pathway. The end result is a compound called ATP. That is the main fuel source for every cell in your body. It takes in the sugars, the fats, the carbs, and proteins, whatever it might be, modifies those, and eventually they all end up as ATP that the cell then uses for all of its individual intracellular or within the cell processes. And you can see here in this little wheel all the different things that NAD is involved with, and they all kind of go back to that energy production cycle. And in that cycle, NAD is most specifically referred to as a cofactor, but in reality, it's kind of like the shuttle. It is in there carrying a piece of the construction, if you will, along the pathway to it. So without NAD, the whole cycle stops. And so having that there and having in good enough quantity then helps the body be able to manufacture the energy it needs to function. And obviously, if the cells have adequate energy, then they can perform at their optimal levels. If you're short on NAD or short on anything in that energy cycle, then that cell, and in reality, all cells in the body, then suffer a little bit because of it. So let's talk a little bit about Gold Factor. This, in each milliliter of this, we're actually talking about just under 1 trillion individual gold crystals. So about 800 billion of them in there. And each of those crystals is capable of participating in several thousand reactions every single second. So if you're good at math and you like really big numbers, you're looking into trillions and trillions of cellular reactions that can be impacted by Gold Factor. And we'll talk a little bit about how this works, but basically this serves as what's referred to as a catalyst. So it is, again, another type of cofactor, but it is not used up or depleted in any way in the reaction. And its main role is to help reduce the burden necessary to complete those reactions. Essentially, think of it as kind of like grease or oil in your cellular mechanics. And it makes everything move a little bit smoother, makes it work a little bit faster. And in the process, it's always there, always aiding. And so Gold Factor sits within these cellular processes and makes them easier to perform and to happen at a faster rate. And because it's not consumed, it's there to participate in many reactions. But really quickly, before we get into the studies we've done on this, I just want to kind of emphasize how this is made and what another one of the things that makes this a very unique product for For Life. And most of the other gold products on the marketplace are done using chemical reactions. You throw in a bunch of one thing and another thing, you process them in a certain way, and out comes these gold crystals. But there's a lot of byproducts and other things that are kind of leftover remnants of all of those chemicals also in the mix. The gold factor for life is made in a very proprietary manner using just ultra pure water and these gold rods. So these are highly purified gold rods. We run through them a very specific level of electricity. So it's not just the strength of the current, but it's the frequency of the current, all those things that matter. And it's the spacing of those rods and the flow of the water. All of those factor into what is generated and the size of the crystals that we produce out of it. And so here you go. You have two ingredients, gold and water. That's what's in this product. There's nothing left behind, no byproducts, no side products, none of that kind of stuff. It's just gold and water. So that's one of the probably the biggest differentiating factor for the For Life Gold Factor versus some of the other gold waters out there. So let's talk about the research behind this. We have two studies that were completed when we launched this. We talked about those at convention, kind of reiterate them briefly here, and then I will quickly talk about a third one that is in the publication process right now. So I'll start off with a company called Neurosys. Their main role is looking at things that impact neurons, so brain cells, nerve cells, looking at how they behave and things that can prolong the life of nerve cells as well as improve various aspects of their function. Here you see Dr. Calazo. She's the head officer and main researcher there. She's the one we worked with in coordinating this study. Really quickly, the study was done in kind of two different phases, one for 7 days and another for 10 days. In the 7 day, we just looked at regular growing neurons as they would in most of the research. In the 10-day one, stressed them a little bit, took out some of the growth factors and some of the nutrients that those nerve cells needed to grow, kind of forcing them into a kind of an older cell state. So looking at how it works in normal healthy growing cells and how it works in kind of stressed or older nerve cells. We'll start off with how they worked in normal cells. You can see the chart here. The gray bars represent the untreated nerve cells. And notice they're all kind of sitting right at that 100% mark. So you can see that's the normal level for these cells in this experiment. And then when we add in the gold factor, you can see that there's a 10% or greater increase in how well the cells survive. We had fewer cells die in the process. In the neurite growth, so these are the little kind of tentacles that come out of nerve cells, how nerve cells communicate with each other. So improving connections and improving communication between nerve cells. And then synaptic numbers. So the synapse is a part where one nerve cell touches another nerve cell. And between that little narrow space, they pass chemicals back and forth. And that's how nerve cells pass information along, how a nerve signal is transmitted through multiple nerve cells, all through those synapses. So synaptic numbers kind of goes along with the neurite growth. You're growing out the little fingers and you're making more and more connections with additional nerve cells. Both of those then having the benefit in terms of helping nerve cells communicate with each other. And just kind of give you why that's important. Current theory suggests that it's the connections between nerve cells where memories and other information is stored. So the more connections you have, the more you're remembering, the more you're learning. And so that's kind of taking what we're seeing on a cellular level and trying to translate it into the big picture of what it's doing. So you're increasing survival and you're increasing the way that nerve cells can communicate with each other, which then theoretically at least leads to better ability to learn and to remember. So pretty cool stuff seeing that kind of improvement with just a few days of gold factor. Now, if we look in the stressed condition, you see a similar thing. Now, here we're actually looking at a decrease in function. So you see the 100 is at the top of the chart there. when you stress these cells, obviously it's going to cause some problems with the way that they grow and how well they survive. And you can see with growth factor in the mix, more of the cells survived in that deprived condition, and more of them continued to grow those neurons. So both of those things working in normal cells and in stressed cells shows that growth factor has some pretty substantial benefits in the health of your neurons and your brain and cognitive function. So that's one of our studies. Let's move on now and talk a little bit about another one. This is a Roseland Institute who does a number of different ones. And this is Dr. Ghana. She, again, is the head for this group and who performed the research. And again, before we kind of dive into what we did in this study, let's talk a little bit about telomeres, just to give you some background. What you see here, your chromosome, that kind of X-shaped item, that's where your DNA, all of your genetic information is stored. You have 23 of these, and every time a cell divides, it creates a copy of its DNA, it's a copy of these chromosomes. And you can see the little kind of orange caps at the end of the chromosome. Those are called telomeres. They are a little protective cap that goes on the end of the DNA to prevent it from being damaged. Obviously, while you're dividing and after you've copied it, you don't want the DNA to be damaged, because then you get a cell that has bad DNA. And so you have these telomeres at the ends of your chromosomes to keep them protected from the environment and other things that might damage your genetic code. Each time a cell divides, those telomeres shorten a little bit. And at some point, the telomeres are completely exhausted, and then that cell goes into a programmed cell death and essentially just kind of kills itself off. It's like, I can no longer protect my DNA, so let's make sure that I don't pass on bad genes by continuing to replicate. And so the cell goes off and kills itself essentially in the process. And so the longer your telomeres, the longer that cell will live, the longer it will continue to divide. And so keeping longer telomeres then has some potential benefits in longevity. To go along with that, there is an enzyme called telomerase. This enzyme's job then is to continually add to those telomeres, lengthening them as you go. And so we look at a couple different things. So you can look at either the length of the telomeres, which is really kind of difficult to do, or you can look at the activity of telomerase and see how well your body is doing at preserving the length of those telomeres. And that's what we looked at in this particular study. So again, looking at cells in this case, and they go through a number of divisions. And you can kind of see up to the big top here, we start with one set of cells, and then it's divided into two groups, one of which got the gold factor, the other one, no treatment. We let them divide a number of times, doubling their numbers each time. And so as we look at that, they refer to these as passages. So each time it divides, that's one passage. And that's the terminology you'll see as we look at the results here. So the different colored bars here show the number of passages. We go from 2 in the gray to 8 in the light blue, 12 in the green, and then 15 in the kind of purple color. So that's 15 times the cell has divided. It's doubled its numbers 15 times. And you can see that with each division, each passage as it's called, that telomerase activity is increasing. And so as the cells age, you're seeing more and more activity with that telomerase enzyme as it's exposed to the gold factor. Now you look at the untreated condition, telomerase has a very slow and gradual decline, right? And that's pretty much what we would expect, because as the cell divides, it gets closer and closer to death. And then having reduced telomerase activity just kind of adds or goes along with that gradual decline with age. So some pretty cool stuff. When this was kind of just first blush, let's see what happens with the gold factor. And then we repeated the study again, and this time threw in some comparators, looking at a couple of products on the market that have been touted as being able to activate telomerase. And you can see in this case, one of them did an okay job. The other one did quite well, and in fact was very comparable to the gold factor. The gold factor still kind of edged it out a little bit. And again, the no treatment condition where you see that gradual decrease. So what you can take away from this slide is that Gold Factor is as good or better than anything else out there. And these leading longevity brands, as we label them here, really are the ones that are touted as having the greatest telomerase activity. So we didn't just pick the bottom of the barrel. We tried to compare ourselves against some of the best ones out there. And so Gold Factor, good or better than anything else on the marketplace in terms of activating telomerase, which could then have some potential benefits in longevity. And there you have it. There is a quick rundown on the science Gold Factor. And as I mentioned, we have another study that completed about the time we did convention here, but it's taken us this long to get it written up, and it's now in the kind of publication acceptance and review phase, which probably will take a few more months. It's not a fast process, but it is a good one because it means that it's getting reviewed by experts in the area. Make sure that we did it right and that the conclusions stated in the article are in agreement with the methods and the results we're seeing. And that study is different than these other two in that it looked at joint health. And so you'll see that hopefully coming out, if we're lucky, by the end of the year. It might be into the first quarter of next year before it actually makes it into publication. But obviously there'll be a press release and other information released as that study gets published, and you'll have access to read it as well. So there's 2 in a quarter studies. So we'll talk more in detail about the other one once it is published, so that you can have all the details on that. But a really great product. It is, again, a good complement to the transfer factor products and a great thing to help add to the energy cycles of every cell